Good evening. This is Chubby Chaser with a special Hash News COVID-19 update. That's right, I said COVID-19. You know why? Because coronaviruses are not just one specific kind of virus. They're a whole fucking family of viruses. They include MERS and SARS, the common flu and the common cold. So basically calling COVID-19 coronaviruses is kind of like going into your local bar saying, hey, I'd like a glass of alcohol, please. And what's going to happen? They're not going to give it to you because you sound like a dumbass. Did you know that? I didn't know that. If you don't know that, maybe we need to talk a little bit about exactly what's going on right now. Because I'm a little worried that some people aren't so sure. I'm not worried about you. You're smart. But everybody else watching this right now, they're probably fucking morons. And if they're fucking morons, we'll probably have to educate them. So for you, just sit back, relax, enjoy the show, knowing that we're helping to educate a lot of fucking morons. Anyways, I will apologize right off the bat. This is going to be a little more serious than normal, a little more heavy. I promise we'll get back to the last all the chuckles. But in the meantime, we need to have a serious conversation. Here, so as any serious conversation, go ahead and grab a beer. This one's brought to you by Ten Brow Brewing Pub Beer, the beer of coronavirus. So grab one and come back. I'll give you a few seconds here. All right, let's get started. Now, I'll say right now that I am not an epidemiologist. I'm an economist and policy analyst. Basically, my job is to look at a whole bunch of different data and understand how it's going to affect different things. I'm not supposed to know the nitty-gritty behind everything. If you want to know that kind of stuff, ask an epidemiologist. I asked some people about this kind of stuff to make sure I didn't sound like a complete idiot, though I'm probably going to say something stupid if you really fact-check me. But the basics are basically correct. So, let's assume that you don't know what the fuck a virus is. Let's start at the bottom. Well, it's pretty simple. A virus is just a parasite that wants to come into your body so it can go attach itself to your cells and force them to make more viruses. There's a whole thing with DNA, RNA, blah, blah, blah. Not important, just know it's a parasite that wants to get in your body. Your body, for some reason, doesn't seem to like this. I don't know, usually I like it when things get put in my body, but maybe that's just me. Anyway, so when your body finds out that its viruses are trying to get inside of it, it freaks the fuck out, and it sends its immune system to go kick that shit off the block, like get the fuck out of here. Well, sometimes your body doesn't do so good at that. Sometimes the immune system doesn't really do so well, because viruses are sneaky. Viruses are changing all the time, so they can sneak in there and get into your shit. So what your body does is it basically does like every great war movie where you see the enemy about to overtake the front lines, where they call in and say, fuck it, nuke the front line, nuke it! And they blow shit the fuck up. And that's basically all the symptoms that we have when we're sick. It's not caused by the virus. The virus actually doesn't want to kill us. The virus wants us to live as long as possible so we can pump out more virus for it. It's our own body basically killing itself because it's freaked out because it's losing the war. Okay, that's the basics of viruses. We don't have to go into that. COVID-19 is an interesting virus because it's brand new. Our bodies have never seen it before. Now, a lot of viruses, our body has seen it or something similar enough where they're pretty good at fighting it off. That's where this whole immunity thing comes from. You get a disease, your body knows what it looks like. Next time it comes around, we go in and kill them before they even have time to multiply beyond this couple. Pretty cool system. But in COVID-19, it's pretty new, so our bodies have no fucking clue what they're doing, so it's actually fairly dangerous to us. Overall, you could probably say that COVID-19 is kind of a combination of SARS and the common flu, where the common flu, it's very infectious but not very deadly, and SARS is not very infectious but very deadly. So COVID-19 is kind of in between. Now, usually with the flu, if you kind of look at how many critical care cases they have compared to the age, it kind of looks like this. Hold on, my marker's been open for a little bit here. Sorry, I'm going to keep burping here. So basically, the normal flu is most dangerous for the very young and the very old. That's because the very young have new enough immune systems where they don't have any experience. They're like a bunch of frickin' green recruits in this situation. And the old people have trouble because all their immune systems are fairly degraded because they're old as balls. That's how life works. Coronavirus is very different than this because unlike the normal flu, it really doesn't affect the young. But sign up, it really affects the old. And the death rates are very high, and that's why this has become such a major concern. How much of a difference does this age actually make, though? Let's look into that. Ooh, hold on there, let me make sure I wrote down the right one. There we go. This age factor is actually fairly important, because if we look at what's going on with the coronavirus, we can see that different age groups react very differently. So, instance, here we're breaking down people from 0 to 20, 20 to 50, 50 to 70, and older than 70. Now, they make up different portions of the population. For instance, the youngest people make about 23%, the middle-aged about 40%, the younger kind of people who are right in the middle of their lives make up about 40%, the middle-aged people 25%, and the old about 12%. And if you look at these numbers, this first row is basically how many people end up being hospitalized with the coronavirus based upon the data we have so far out of China and Italy and the Koreas. So we can see that when you're young, you don't really get hospitalized a lot. But once you start getting over 50, that jumps up from 3.1% to 13.5%. And by the time you're over 70, we're talking about a quarter of the cases are going to have to go to the hospital. It gets even worse when you start talking about critical care. With critical care, the younger are less than 1%, are basically less than 0.01%. But it starts going up to the point where by the time you're in your 70s, there's a 14% chance if you have COVID-19, I'm doing it myself. See how easy that shit is? You're going to end up having to go to the hospital in critical care, which means you're going to be there over a long period of time. It's even more frightening with the death rate. When you're basically under 50, there's less of a 1% chance that you will die of coronavirus, and that increases as you get older. You get over 50, it's only 1.4. At 70, you get up to 6.5% and even higher. By the time you're in your 80s, late 80s, we're talking about over 10%. So this is a little frightening, especially if you're an older person. Now, why is the reason for this? Is because the COVID-19 is the boomer sweeper, or Greta Thunberg's revenge, or any of these other creative names people have come up with? Not really. It more has to do with the fact that as you get older, you get a lot of these other existing conditions. Maybe you have cancer or hepatitis or cardiovascular disease or pulmonary disease, all these things that kind of affect your body's ability to defend itself, which are much more common when you're old. And that's why this curve goes up that way. And in fact, most of these people who are dying or getting very sick in the younger ages are people with these pre-existing conditions already. Maybe they have diabetes, some shit like that. Oops, hold on, drop shit there. I'm all excited, can't you tell? So, let's kind of look about what's going on right now. So in most cases, with most virus outbreaks that are similar to the flu, the last big one being H1N1 in 2009, usually what we see is a curve like this. Where basically a whole bunch of a few people get sick, they spread it around, it starts doubling every day, and then you end up hitting a peak. And then that goes back down. Basically, it starts to go back down because A, enough people have died, if that's going to be the case, or B, enough people have gotten the disease where we've built up a herd immunity. Basically, enough people are now immune where the disease does not have enough new hosts to really spread. And so it drops down and disappears. Now, this all sounds well and good, except for the fact that with coronavirus, if we just let it do... Sorry, I'm going to keep doing that. So I'm going to have a drink of beer here real quick. Think about it yourself. So anyways, if we let this go with the COVID-19, the problem is that over 80% of the population is likely going to get this disease, which is much higher than a normal flu. Because again, none of us have immune systems that understand what COVID-19 looks like. They just let people walk right through the gates, like a bunch of dumbasses. So if we let COVID-19 do this normal curve, which is the normal disease curve, then we're probably going to see deaths of about 2 million people, because 80% of us will get sick. Now, 2 million people, if you don't know, is a hell of a lot of fucking people. Well, it gets even worse than that, because realistically, we do not have enough critical care beds, or our critical care hospital system is not large enough to handle this large of an influx of people. In fact, if we were going to put a line for that, it would go right about there. So what happens? After we get above this line, that means anybody who gets sick that needs critical care most likely isn't going to get it. Which means that if you get COVID-19 too late in this curve, you won't be able to get a respirator, you won't be able to get the other things that you need. And so things where you might have survived if you had it, you're not going to get it, so you're going to die. This also has an effect because at the same time this is going on, there's other people also getting sick or hurt with other things. If you get a car accident and you go to a hospital where everyone already has all the equipment for COVID-19, what's your chances of surviving? So it's been basically estimated that doing a normal curve, and because we break this line, we're going to end up with another 2 million deaths that would have been preventable, for a total amount of deaths of 4 million. 4 million people. And that's going to be pretty big on the older segment of the population. In fact, it's estimated that probably about 12% of people over 70 will die if we do nothing. Well, so what can we do instead? Well, when we started this out, a lot of what people were talking about were things that are called mitigation strategies. Now, mitigation strategies, which we'll write up here, the pen isn't writing, mitigation, includes a lot of different strategies. I mean, and most of these you already understand. One is case isolation at home. So basically, you get sick, you stay at home until you get better. That way you don't go spreading it around. Another thing that they're doing is a voluntary quarantine. Again, if you're around someone who's sick, or you had a chance of being around someone who's sick, such if you went to France, bottom dollar, you lucky bastard. When you get home, it's highly suggested you quarantine yourself for 2 weeks. That way you have less of a chance, there's a chance for the symptoms to show up so you'll know whether or not you have the virus. And the final thing is social distancing of at-risk people. So basically, this is the idea that if you're over 70, you just keep away from people. You work from home if you can. You lessen the amount of time you spend around other people, and you lessen the number of people you spend time around. Now, these all sound like great things, but there's a little problem. If we do this, we end up with a curve about like this. And this is the famous flattening the curve that we're all hearing about. The idea of, because the hospital system can't handle this number of cases all at once, we flatten out the curve by spreading out the amount of time that people are going to get the disease by slowing down the spread. However, this isn't really an optimal thing because the problem is that even though this curve is much lower than it was before, it still peaks out at about 8 times the capacity of the hospital system to handle. So basically what we end up with is we're still going to lose about 1 million people just from the disease. And then because we're getting above this red line of the hospital capacity, we're going to lose another 1 million people who could have survived but won't because they can't get the medical care they need, for a total of 2 million. So yeah, we did. We've cut this number basically in half. But unfortunately, half of 4 million is still 2 million, which is a lot of fucking people. We're talking about 6% of everybody over 70 being dead by the time this thing is all said and done. Now, there's some people who could argue like, oh, we're not going to miss them anyways. And that's kind of making you a shitty person. And besides, who really wants to live in that world? Where would we get our hard candies? Think about it. So, what can we do? So, that's kind of why we're seeing a lot of these stronger strategies to deal with this disease, what are called the suppression strategies. These are the big ones. These include things such as social distancing for everybody, which is why we're all sitting in our houses like a bunch of schmucks right now and not going out and hashing and having a lot of fun. Basically, it's the argument that the only way to keep the disease from really spreading is to get everyone away from the disease, to hide away, to hope it doesn't spread. Another thing that might happen is a lockdown. Now, right now, social distancing is suggested. It's like, okay, don't go to work if you don't have to, work from home, go to the grocery store if you need to, don't limit your contacts. We're going to trust you. You're adults. Lockdown is when they say, okay, we realize you're not adults. We realize you're a bunch of dumbasses. So here's what you got to do. You're doing what we say, otherwise we're going to hold you accountable for it. Now then, the thing about these strategies are they fucking work. If you look at the curve for with these strategies in place, it looks more like this. It actually never gets above that line. And as a result, we're talking about only thousands of people going to the hospital, not millions of people. And we're also talking about only hundreds, maybe a couple thousand, or maybe only hundreds of people dying, which is a hell of a lot less than 2 million.
Wow.
That's why we're doing this, to try to keep all these people from dying. And it's why it's so important for us all to do what we're supposed to be doing. However, we're seeing a bit of a problem with this. Right now, it makes a lot of sense to do it because this is basically the curve that we got here with China and Italy. They got so far up this curve that their hospital system couldn't handle it anymore, and that's why there's freaking out in those countries right now. We do all these strategies early enough, we don't get above the curve. But what's the problem? Well, there's always a problem with everything. Let's find out what it is. There we go. Now this is looking at a bit longer term of what we're doing. So again, here's that curve that we expect to see. Here's our critical care line. And here's our line that we get if we do all the strategies we're supposed to do. The lockout and all the suppression strategies to keep COVID-19 from getting around. The problem is because we did all these suppression strategies, we actually don't have enough people getting the disease, so we end up with no herd immunity. So basically what we're talking about is people who get the disease get immunity to it. That's how our immune systems work. They can't get it again. Enough people have that happen, the disease kind of dies out because it doesn't have enough victims anymore, enough hosts. However, if we keep everyone from getting the disease, which we have to do to keep this green line below the maximum level that our hospitals can handle, nobody gets any herd immunity, maybe a couple thousand people. So as a result, the moment that we say, okay, hey, the disease is gone, you guys don't have to stay inside anymore. We'll take away these suppression strategies. It's time for you to have a good time. People will just start getting the disease again. And it can be just as big of a spike as it was going to be in the first place. And realistically, we can't have that. So what's that mean? What that means is, realistically, we cannot lift these suppression strategies until such a time that we have a vaccine. Now, probably many of you heard in the news lately that we have already started testing the vaccine. In fact, 3 of them are already well along in the development phase, and 1 just started human testing. They skipped animal testing because it's so important. However, even with the fact that we have already started human testing, realistically, it's going to be between 12 to 24 months before a vaccine is ready and able to be distributed widely throughout the population. The reason for that is because, A, you just can't give people an untested vaccine. What if it turns out to be worse than the actual disease itself? What if it makes everybody sterile? What if it makes you grow 2 dicks? What if one of the dicks eats your other dick? There's a lot of things that can go on in medicine that you gotta make sure is safe. So there's really no getting around this 12 to 24 month time frame. Well, as you can imagine, this is a bit of a problem. So what do we have to do? Well, basically what's going to happen over the next 18 months is this. So let's kind of zoom in. And here's our hospital line. And then here's our initial. We go up, we get close, and then we go back down again. And at that point, we probably lift some of our suppression. And we go, hey, good job. We did good. Well, then it starts rising again, and we have to turn the suppression back on. So we have to start going into these lockdowns again. Then it goes up, and then that brings it back down. We lift off some of the suppressions. Again, it starts to go back up. So we have to go back in the lockdown. Goes back down, goes back up, and we basically end up in this permanent cycle throughout this situation. Now, that doesn't mean things won't get better as we go along. For instance, there's things that will increase this red line. Two of the big ones are the idea that A, we'll be able to build more capacity in our system, bring more doctors and nurses online over time, like by bringing people out of retirement or making it easier for people to become certain classes of doctors and nurses. And as well, we'll be able to shorten the amount of time that people have to be treated in critical care because A, we're going to just get better at it the more experience we have, and B, we'll be able to do more experiments with the drugs we currently have to see if they can help shorten the amount of time the virus affects people, though not cure it. But even with all those, we're not going to raise this red line by a huge amount. And because of that, we're going to be stuck in this sine wave. I don't think that's a sine wave. I don't know. It's been a long time since I took trigonometry. Either way, we're going to be stuck in this cycle for 12 to 24 months. So for people who are sitting there thinking to themselves, hey, we only have to last in here for a couple weeks, maybe a month at most before we can go back to our normal lives, that's not going to happen. Realistically, that is not going to happen. And I think it's about time we start understanding that's going to be how our lives are going to be for the next 12 to 24 months. And as you can imagine, that's kind of really going to fuck with a lot of things, such as the economy, our way of life, and a lot of different things. But you know what? This has already been long as shit, so we'll leave that for another time. So in the meantime, here's to you. God bless.